Hello, my friends, and welcome to another Tintincast episode. This is episode 15.
By the whiskers of Curvytash.
Yes, and if you're a Tintin fan, you'll know which episode we're doing. Although probably you do already because it's in the thumbnail. But yeah, we've managed to get all the way to Calculus Affair.
O caso giração em português. This is my Portuguese copy because I'm learning Portuguese at the moment, and it struck me when I was reading this. Actually, the language of Tintin and Hergé is not for children. I mean, I managed to read a lot of Bram Stoker's Dracula in Portuguese, but this I really struggled with. So I think it's partly because of Haddock, of course, with all of his ridiculous ectoplasms and yeah, that's right. But it was really interesting. And I also watched it the early 90s France-Canada co-production cartoon of this as well.
Oh yeah, they did like a feature sort of version, didn't they? Did they serialize it and does it do it as a feature version? Or they're
kind of a couple of parts. Yeah, they're about, I think, 30 minutes each or something.
Yeah, so this comes, well, obviously Marcus can do the details in a minute, but this comes just after the 2 Moon books. So obviously things very intense as we were building up to going to the moon. And this is a great back down to earth Tintin book, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, in a number of ways, it's been a pretty rocky road for Hergé over the last, well, since the start of the Second World War, really. And we're sort of 15 years past that, more than 15 years past that. Anyway, when we last left Hergé and his wife Germaine, they'd been involved in a car crash, which had been Hergé's fault in his sports car, going to overtake another car that was turning off and going into the side of the car. And this left Germaine in a wheelchair for some time. And due to Germaine's injury, Hergé and Germaine have to move out of their home. And they move into a small apartment, which has a lift because she's in a wheelchair. She's then on sticks. Now, a while before that, Germaine and Hergé had struck up this friendship with this self-styled Dutch clairvoyant, Bert-Ger Jacquenot. And in fact, Jacquenot had apparently warned Hergé and Germaine of approaching danger not long before this crash. And Hergé seemed to be quite a believer in all of these things that Jacquenot would do, his astrology sign and give him potions that helped with his eczema, apparently, when he returned to work. And Hergé does seem to have been quite a believer in astrology and mysticism, according to his friends. Anyway, as Germaine recuperated, she also began to drink quite heavily, and she became more closely involved with Jacquenot, who would read her horoscope and give advice to the couple. Jacquenot was also very critical of some of Hergé's friends, and in particular, Jacques van Melkebeek, who was Hergé's long-term friend and collaborator, who she said was evil and a bad influence on Hergé. And this actually seems to have led Hergé to break off his friendship and working relationship with van Melkebeek entirely at this stage. So he's taking advice from this Jacquenot. Many people, I think, thought that she was taking advantage of Hergé and Germaine. But generally, apart from that, by 1954, after this long period of turmoil in his life, things were going a little more smoothly. The new studios Hergé are now in full swing. They're expanding. Hergé's running a tight ship there. His relationship with Tintin magazine owner Raymond Leblanc seems to have improved. And for the first time in his married life, he seems to be able to separate his home and his work life. So rather than throwing himself into womanizing, he's throwing himself into work now. So the Calculus Affair began being serialized in Tintin magazine on the 22nd of December, 1954.
So we're into the swinging 50s. Yeah. The first page of this, you can tell immediately that this is a conscious decision to not be on the moon anymore. And to put that behind him. And I think this is generally considered the start of the third and final phase of the Tintin books, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, from now on, it seems like every frame and page in the adventures is a real collaboration between all of these studio members. And it seems to have also meant that Hergé has the time now to become even more fanatical about the detail and the realism in the stories. And apparently every frame in this particular book is sketched from real life or from characters that would pose in the studio for them. Hergé spent a lot of time in Switzerland taking photos and making preparatory sketches. Apparently, they would sketch out lots of different, like here's one of them, sketch lots of drawings for each frame. And then they would choose the best sketch, and then they would work that up. And Hergé, I think, also said that he wasn't, if they got to page 40 and he had a better idea for something on page 15, they'd just go all the way back and redo the cartoon from page 15. So he was able to become even more meticulous in what he did from this stage on.
Yeah, and he was under quite a lot of scrutiny as well. Apparently, people would say, yeah, there's details of Geneva that he tried to get right that he got slightly wrong, and but he apparently, there's things like some of the furniture from his studios was included in some of the designs. I think it's one of the bad guys' lairs or something like that, and or the police station, and the cars. He very closely, for someone who'd been in a car crash a few years earlier, there's lots of car crashes in this episode. Lots of cars flying off the road, but it's great because it starts with a more successful Haddock at home at Marlinspike Hall. He's enjoying being the lord of the manor, peace and quiet, and obviously there's the beginning of a funny running gag with Mr. Cuts the Butcher, which just gets funnier and funnier every time. No, this is not Mr. Cuts the Butcher, and the way that Hergé plays with it is that every time someone makes a phone call, it seems in this book, they get through to Mr. Cuts the Butcher, or Mr. Cuts is phoning them, or someone bumps into him at one point.
Like even if it's an international call,
Yes, it's like, hello, Mr. Cuts the what? Why, so Haddock at home with Tintin and chewing straw. Haddock smoking a pipe, and he's like, here I am, nice and quiet. No more adventures, no more moon, no more car crashes, nothing. And this is, again, this book seems to be the start of a sort of detective. It's a very mystery phase of Tintin rather than, well, there is a sort of spy element to this one, isn't it? Because of the Cold War 50s, but it's not.
Yeah, it's quite Cold War, isn't it? And it has that same, even though it's not a duology like the Moon books or the Unicorn and the other books that we've been looking at recently, it still has that sort of book of two halves thing. So the first half is the mystery where you kind of try and work out why everything is, all the glass is smashing and who are these strangers watching Marlinspike. And then in the second half, there's this quest to find calculus. So it sort of takes almost like that duology format, but crams it into 62 pages.
It does. I noticed that. Yeah, it's so full of stuff. I mean, again, we've been saying this, but as the books have continued, we're like, this is Hergé at the height of his powers and so forth. But then obviously during the war, there was some good stuff, and then there was Land of Black Gold, which we gave a slightly lower mark to because it was done before and after the war. So it's slightly Wobbly. But this one, Calculus Affair, really is Hergé at his most productive, probably his happiest. That technique you describe when they do loads of different sketches and then go back if they get it wrong. What a lovely way to work, with loads of different artists all contributing. He's got a great, he's not under the gun. He's being creative. He's got the freedom to be creative. He's got the time to be creative. And you can tell because the story, the jokes, the characterization in this are just absolutely phenomenal, I think.
I think it has a lovely balance, this book, because I always quite liked his political to pre-war adventures. And this has a lot of that. But it also balances it really nicely with the comedy and the slapstick as well. I just feel it's all really nicely balanced, this book.
The slapstick's great. I mean, Haddock ending up impaled on barbed wire, stuck in a chandelier, falls over so many times. There's a continuing joke about Haddock just can't seem to ride in any land-bound vehicle because he bangs his head all the time. Yet if you put him on a boat in the high seas, he's just absolutely in his element. And the little things like, when they're talking to the guy they find trussed up and they're talking to him, and all Haddock can talk about is relating to his love of drink. That's everything he says. Is that, imagine suddenly you're drinking a glass and the glass smashes and you had a drink from it, and then it's like, and then I'm really thirsty, and then it's like, everything he's talking about is related to drink, and Tintin's trying to say, no, we're talking about the glass smashing, Captain.
Hergé does this a lot now. Whenever there's a lot of information to be put over in a book, in the book where there's a lot of exposition going on, there'll always be some kind of, Haddock will be doing something entirely differently and quite comedic in the background.
Yeah, and it's done so well. They managed to fit it in so well. It doesn't get in the way. He is a buffoon, is Haddock, and he is an angry thing, but he's so funny. because he's so exasperated by everything. But yeah, the plot here is, glass keeps smashing. And at first they think it's Snowy running around chasing the cat. But then they gradually realize it's something to do with Professor Calculus. Calculus in this one becomes the sort of culmination of calculus, because it's almost like he's Einstein in this one. He's come up with something that will level cities, and it's not a nuclear bomb, although they will have known about this at this time because of Hiroshima and so forth. But he's come up with a device that can smash structures by sonic projection, which is scary. It's a scary thing. It seems quite, and I like the fact that it's to do with, it's almost like a giant version of his ear trumpet.
That's true. I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, because obviously the whole kind of running joke is that he's deaf as well. So to be working on an ultrasonic project makes sense. And it's apparently it's the whole story, the whole premise is was suggested by a story from Britain, which Hergé read in a Belgian weekly newspaper, that there had been multiple incidents on the road from Portsmouth to London in southern England in which motorist car windscreens would just shatter in the same place on the road each time. And apparently there was a nearby secret facility that the police weren't let into, but they thought that probably something was going on there which was causing this to happen. So Hergé seems to have become obsessed by this story, and so that's at the root of this book. And he seems to have really enjoyed the notion behind this book, the story. He's really kind of gets on board with it.
Yeah, it's almost like an X-File, isn't it? It's like Indiana Jones, but also the mystery it's mystery rather than mysticism at this point. That's the thing. I think he did the mysticism throughout the war because it was easier to sort of say, let's do some escapist stuff. But it's not. There's no more mysticism in Tintin now. I don't think. It's very practical stuff. So, again, it's a mystery. It's like the Land of Black Gold. Why is the petrol exploding? This is why are the windows exploding? And then, of course, while he's going around Marlinspike, the lights go out and stuff. And then in comes one of the best Tintin characters ever. There's a few episodes from now on, which is Mr. Jolyon Wagg, who's of the Rock Bottom Insurance Company.
Yeah, and Hergé delights in throwing these incendiary characters into the book just to wind the captain up.
Yeah, and he really does too. He basically moves in. He's just selling him insurance for the whole. And then later on, when Haddock's abroad, Jolyon's on the phone going, "Well, I've sorted that insurance for you." All these, it's like, and Haddock's just like, "What are you talking about? I don't want any blasted insurance." And Jolyon's just, he's so happy. I mean, he lives up to his name. He's just a happy, smiling gentleman who is going to sell you insurance, whether you like it or not.
Hergé said that of Jolyon Wagg that he's the sort of person who's completely satisfied with himself, not a wicked man, but very smug.
Yeah, he's almost like a version of what's the chap, the guy who can sell anything in the previous.
Oh yeah, Oliveira de Figueira.
That's it. And he's a con man. Jolyon Wagg is just, he loves his job. He loves his life. He is going to sell you insurance. You're going to leave the room having been sold insurance by Jolyon Wagg, like it or not.
And he's obviously really popular because he's in every book now apart from Tintin in Tibet. That's
right. Yeah, it would have been a bit contrived to have him in Tibet unless he's phoning up, to offer them insurance while they're traveling. Although Haddock, you probably do with a bit of insurance. It's like Ned Ryerson in Groundhog Day. Phil eventually ends up buying every single type of insurance because he's been shot, stabbed, burned, frozen, electrocuted. So it's quite a nice bit of poetic justice. But then, obviously calculus turns up and you're like, well, what's going on with calculus? Something odd is going on with calculus. And then it's sort of very 39 steps, lady vanishes kind of thing. Calculus disappears. And that's the mystery. You're like, well, why is calculus? Why? And then why is he wandering out the hotel when they're wandering in? He hasn't been kidnapped. It's like you mentioned. It's like Frantic, the Roman Polanski film, or Rear Window, or something like that, where you assume what's happened is entirely sinister or not, or so. So this chase happens across various countries to find calculus. So I think it's a great plot device.
And it's Interesting that although the book's called The Calculus Affair, I think calculus is only in it for 10 pages, unlike the Moon books where he really is the star.
Yeah, he drives the Moon books, doesn't he? But in this, they're dealing with the fallout of calculus's invention again.
Yes.
But this one is like there's a device in Doctor Who called the Osterhagen key, and it's something that instantly translates everything everyone's written, so you can understand everything in every language, which means you can decode every secret.
This is like the Babelfish in Hitchhiker's Guide.
Yeah, exactly. And the Babelfish ends up causing more wars than anything ever invented, because everyone can just understand what everyone else is saying, which is a brilliant bit of Douglas Adams' satire there. But yeah, so, they chloroform. Well, he goes off with Cuts the Butcher first, doesn't he? You think, that this book we're after was going to get taken away. There's that brilliant sort of Marlin Spike half page where you just see all this carnival outside Marlin Spike. It's like a media circus.
Yeah, and this is all because the Thompsons don't get a big part in this. No. I mean, from this book onwards, really, they don't play a huge role, because Captain really is the person who's doing most of the slapstick now. But they do seem to bring some knowledge from Scotland Yard or Interpol that's always quite useful in these cases. But in this case, they can't resist telling the press about all these things that are going on, even though they've been sworn to secrecy, and then there's this big media circus.
You can count on the Thompsons to be thoroughly useless and often incredibly in the way and harmful to the case. But yeah, and this is all by page sort of 16, 17. A lot's happened by the time Calculus. But then there's that little sleight of hand in that they're trying to get Calculus, but they haven't managed to kidnap him yet. He's just got a lift with Mr. Cuts the Butcher. Meanwhile, the bad guys are trying to get hold of him so they can chloroform him. He goes to that hotel. Tintin and Haddock show up to try and get him, but Cuthbert Calculus walks out just before they get there. So
that's a lovely scene where one lift's going down, one lift's going up, and they just miss each other.
Yeah, and they're just, he must be in real trouble. And then they, the car chases begin, which I love, and they're knocking on doors, and where is he? And then they find that guy tied up. And there's the whole mystery of this one brand of cigarette that keeps leading them to these guys that.
Yeah, the Macedonia cigarettes, which has got the name of the hotel scribbled on it. And the guy that they find is the other professor, Alfredo Topolino. And I think Topolino is supposed to be the Italian name for Mickey Mouse. So this was sort of a nod to Walt Disney. Hergé had always been a big fan of Walt Disney, and had apparently approached Walt Disney back around the time of the war, or just before, to ask Walt Disney if he would consider making the Tintin adventures as animated cartoons. Disney was too busy at the time, and it doesn't really feel very Disney-like, this sort of thing. But he had a much admiration for Walt Disney.
It's kind of a testament to how unique Hergé's style was, that no one's really, until this, I thought the Spielberg Jackson movie did a great job, but it was, some people don't like CGI motion capture, but it was a style. It went with a certain style. It managed to do its own thing, but also be quite like the books. But no other, the cartoons, the animated cartoons are very good, but they don't quite feel like the clear, lean, drawings. But they're good, and a lot of people love the cartoons, so I would never sort of take away their enjoyment of it. But the books are just so perfect looking. Everyone's line and nose and thing is just perfect. When they're recreated, they're just slightly off. I don't know. But then, by sort of you get into the halfway point, page 26, the house they're in explodes, which is quite a good halfway point.
Just as the captain's toasting to their health.
I know, poor thing. And I love the fact that when he's lying on it in the rubble, he's like, hang on, where's the booze? I've just got to finish this. And then he's like, right, I'm fine now, you can take me to hospital.
It's funny because in the France-Canadian cartoons, the animated cartoons, the whole thing about the captain drinking, that's just removed almost entirely. They obviously felt by the 90s that was just not something that we're going to put in, which is a real shame.
That is a shame. Haddock reminds me of someone like Robert Shaw in Jaws, one of the Ollie Reed, one of those kind of guys who could drink till they were absolutely inhuman. But but they're kind of amazing for it. You know, you kind of think Haddock's amazing, even though he's a pathetic drunkard sometimes. But he struggles. He's an alcoholic. He knows he's an alcoholic. But you know, it's great. But I love the fact that Tintin and Haddock get put in hospital, and then of course the Thompsons come to see them, and within like 4 frames, the Thompsons have fallen on the floor and ended up in body casts.
I love the way that they're introduced, because I think they say something like, "Oh, there have been 2 shady men discovered sort of hanging around the site of the explosion," and then the Thompsons kind of walk in sort of Swiss dress.
Hello, here we are. Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's great. 2 men found loitering in the vicinity of the crime, questioning passers-by. It's really quite subtle. You read it, and you're like, oh, hang on. And then they come in so-called Swiss dress.
Folk dress, yeah.
That's them out the story, because they're now in hospital with body casts, including all over on their nose as well.
But they do bring the clue that the guy who was found in the bushes at Merlin's Spike is actually from Sildavia. So then you've got this whole Borduria Sildavia thing coming back in, and these whole Baltic regions and the big Cold War thing starting to happen.
But yeah, there's some terrific scenes once Haddock and Tintin get out of the hospital, where they go to the big house by the river at night. It's very James Bond, you know.
Yeah, and I think it's one of the first helicopters that we see in Tintin as well, and they're in a rowing boat as well, so they managed to get a boat in.
They've got boats, helicopters. It's very, again, I watched recently Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, and that's got such a terrific way of using vehicles. So they're in Venice, they run down to the river, there's a boat, there's a big boat chase. Then later on there's more boats, but they decide they don't want to have another boat chase. So Indy's like, we can do better than boats, gets on a motorcycle with a sidecar and drives off past the Nazis on the boats, like, bye, we're not doing a boat chase now. And I got that feeling from this as well. It's like, ooh, let's take the boat to the house. Hey, look, there's a helicopter on. Let's nick the helicopter, which is very fun, appropriating. But I've always loved that in movies. I love it when James Bond does it, appropriates vehicles, especially when they're really, really crap. Like there's a 2CV in this, actually, isn't there? A Citroen 2CV, which Haddock obviously bangs his head on the roof of.
Yeah, they commandeer this vehicle off this Italian guy with like a very long name, Arturo Benedetto Giovanni, something or other. And
that's right. Yeah, he's brilliant. I love him. He's brilliant. He's such a character. He's just, he says, Italian cars, Italian drivers, best in the world. Well, first of all, he runs over Captain Haddock and then splats him with window wash.
Yeah.
But, and then he basically terrorizes the entire town with his driving people off the road, going through tar. You know,
the drawings of those cars are absolutely beautiful, actually, and I'm not really a big fan of cars, but they look really beautiful in some of these frames.
No, and I think actually when I was looking through eBay recently for Tintin stuff, they have lots of those cars, model cars. It turns out that's an obsession of a lot of Tintin collectors, is the cars. So they're all different, you know, the American ones and the Italian ones. But then you've got on page 38 that amazing Market Day spread, which is like, where's Wally? It's like you can just, I sat and looked at that for about 10 minutes because you've got, you know, pigs running around, you've got cows pulling farmers along, dogs running, rugs everywhere, eggs flying everywhere, a guy hiding up a statue, you know, chickens. It's just an amazing, amazing panel.
Yes.
As this guy is just driving through the square and terrorizing everybody. So it's got amazing supporting characters, this book. It's just really well done. And then I love the bit where just after that, Tintin's trying to run alongside the plane with the bad guys on, and you think he's going to catch up and do a sort of Tom Cruise Mission Impossible, but he just keeps running and then falls into a stack of hay. It's so fast moving.
This because he does that in Kinot Scepter as well, doesn't he? He falls out the parachute into the hay cart.
Yeah, and obviously that's when Haddock gets impaled on a bunch of barbed wire and then falls over at the airport and then gets hit on the head by a pair of giant spectacles.
That's good. That's
just so many. So again, it's very fast moving. It's very, very slapstick, but it's a chase. It's a chase book. They're chasing after calculus. So there are chases.
And this is when there's the great gag with the sticking plaster, which just gets passed from passenger to passenger and is just the theme of the rest of the book, really. Eventually, the whole plane is dropping up and down in the air with the pilot trying to get this sticking plaster off his thumb.
It's brilliant, and it just shows you different times, and then it continues when they go to their meeting. They brought the plaster with them, and the guy they're meeting was like, "Where the hell is this?" You could almost, like, if it was like an airplane movie, the scene would end with them all leaving, and then this guy would raise his hand to have his cigar, and the plaster would be on the end of the cigar, but ends up on Haddock's hat.
And I love that when they get to Zohud, they're all these statues of the great Kurvitash, the Marshal Kurvitash, who never has a speaking or walk-on part in the books, but he's mentioned in quite a few of the books, I think, from King Ottokar's Scepter onwards. And you see these, you can kind of see the guy with his obviously his curvy tash in a lot of the frames and things. And I hadn't realized, but a lot of the emblem that he has is this sort of curvy moustache and things. And it's on everything. It's like on his pillar, it's on some of the gates, it's on like some of the cars. It's like...
It's his emblem, isn't it? And it's sort of, isn't that supposed to be a little bit of a Stalin reference?
He definitely looks very Stalin-esque. I think back in the King Ottakar Scepter days, it was like muscular and things, wasn't it? But this is obviously trying to be a kind of a Stalin type figure.
Well, that's it. And I think what's the name of the chap with the monocle that they bump into? He's a nasty piece of work.
Spons.
Colonel Spons, that's it.
Yeah, he's chief of the ZEP, or the Bordurian secret police. And apparently Hergé modelled him on his brother Paul. And I'm not sure if that would have been particularly flattering for Paul, because the brothers didn't get on at the best of times, I don't think, after the war. But to be depicted as a sort of general in sort of Stalin's army.
I know. But he's also partly based on the actor Erich von Stroheim, apparently. But then, of course, who should walk past, and she was referenced by Haddock in the last book, but she isn't in it, is Bianca Castafiore. And she gets to be in it for a little bit more than usual before she gets her own book in a few books' time.
Yeah, Hergé is introducing all of the best loved characters by this point. They're coming back a lot now.
But it's amazing that he's able to bring these characters back. They're totally, if they fit, like Bianca Castafiore, she's a woman of the world. She sings opera all around the world. She could literally turn up anywhere. But she's like Janice in Friends, oh my God, you see her and you're like, oh my God, it's Bianca. And Haddock is just at pains to avoid her because he can't stand opera, which is fantastic. But so she pops up, and they use her to help them hide and dupe the bad guys, which is great.
She's the reason they actually get out of this alive, I think, in this particular book.
You got Haddock falling asleep in the opera, which is fantastic, and she does reference the fact that didn't I sound fantastic? Didn't the song about the jewels sound fantastic? Like, yeah, I know. But what I love is, just before the opera scene, you got page 50, 51. Haddock and Tintin are sneaking around at night, and there's like a gun fight or a gunshot from a tall building, and I love the way they're drawn.
Yeah,
sneaking around European city at night look, and I love it when Hergé does nighttime scenes. He's so brilliant at them. Yeah,
it's very much very European, isn't it? All of this, you couldn't mistake it for anywhere else in the world.
And then it's got that car chase towards the end. That's the thing I love about it. I think that one of the main critics who loves Hergé's books said it was one of his favorites, this one, but he thought the ending was rushed. But I just see it as it's a big chase to the finish. I think
it packs a lot in, this book. And apparently I'm not sure why, but in the Tintin magazine, the last few installments of this magazine, they went back to the horizontal format, the landscape format, rather than the portrait format, which I think means that they eventually had to cut quite a lot of frames from the last few pages of the adventure just to get it into the 62-page format. So I think that's possibly one of the reasons why it feels like it has to kind of wraps up quite quickly at the end.
Maybe, but it sort of feels to me like, I've seen movies where there's a race to the finish, and it seems very apt in a chase story.
Yeah, it doesn't bother me at all, because I think most of the time, whenever I see a movie, the last third of the movie really bores me, because it's just trying to tie up loose ends, and actually just to try and put that off as long as possible is fine by me.
A third act, if this was a movie, this would be an 88-minute movie, which is sort of perfect length for a fast-moving comedy action movie. This would be occurring around 85 minutes. You'd have the tank I love the fact that the way they get through the customs house is to go through the customs house, not around. Let's just go through the customs house, boom. And then it's got that great, you find, they've got calculus. It's like once you get calculus, it's almost boring. It's like, we've got him. Let's escape. He can't be captured again. We've got him. It's near the end. But then you've got that fantastic bookend at the end with Marlin Spike Hall, where they get back. Jolyon and his family have basically moved in. And then you've got that brilliant bit of irony where, because calculus can't hear what Haddock said, he thinks he said chicken pox. Haddock has said, "You flaming jack in the box," to calculus, and calculus just goes, "Chicken pox? That's very serious," wanders off. Jolyon hears it and goes, "Oh my God, chicken pox. I'd better go and take my family." So in the end, it's his deafness that saves Captain Haddock from Jolyon Wagg, which is lovely. And then you got that last panel with Snowy's made friends with the cat finally.
Oh yes, yeah. And there's also that lovely bit at the end where this very serious bit where calculus is, struggling morally with what he's created in this ultrasonic death machine, and they decide that they have to set fire to the microfilm, and they manage to set fire to it, but also set fire to Haddock's beard at the same time.
And why not? And I know they use his pipe. It's like, oh, you poor captain. But again, we haven't mentioned Snowy in this book because he basically he's quite functional in this story. He had some good moments with an umbrella. That's the running gag with Snowy in this one. They think they find Calculus's umbrella. There's lots of amazing scenes with where they've got an umbrella and it's raining and they forget to use the umbrella. Then they lose the umbrella. Snowy steals one off a man, and the man falls over because he's leaning on it. Just again, it's just woven in so nicely. So it's kind of without foreshadowing the score we're going to give it. It's kind of a perfect.
No spoiler there.
No spoiler there, yeah.
Well, before we give it a score, let me tell you my theory of what connects the Calculus Affair, Harrison Ford and Roman Polanski, and we've mentioned it already, the film Frantic, because when I was reading through this, I was like, oh, that's a bit like Frantic and things like that. So I started doing a bit of research, and hear me out on this. So in 1983, when Spielberg initially got the rights to create a Tintin movie, he commissioned screenwriter Melissa Matheson, who'd worked on E.T., to draft an initial script for the movie. Now, Roman Polanski became interested in filming the Tintin movie when Spielberg's option on the film expired, and this was around 1988 when Spielberg was busy filming Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. And this was just a bit before the making of Frantic.
Yeah.
Now, at that time, Melissa Matheson, who wrote the initial treatment for the Tintin script, was married to
Harrison Ford.
And the couple both went to Paris around 1988, where Melissa met Polanski about filming her Tintin script.
Right.
And instead, Polanski seems to have become obsessed with her husband, Harrison Ford, and pitched the idea of Frantic to Harrison Ford. And the plot of Frantic is very familiar from the Calculus Affair, because in both stories there's an abduction at the start.
Yeah.
In both stories there's a military secret hidden within an object that's repeatedly seen throughout the adventure. In Frantic, it's this nuclear trigger that's been hidden in a model of the Statue of Liberty.
Yeah.
In the Calculus Affair, it's this microfilm of the ultrasonic weapon that we are led to believe is in Calculus's umbrella, which just gets carried from here to there throughout the adventure. Both adventures involve these military applications that could have catastrophic effects for the world. And both stories have multiple countries and agents trying to get their hands on the secret. Both stories have a clue scribbled on in the case of the Calculus Affair, this cigarette box. In Frantic, it's a phone number scribbled on a matchbox.
All right.
At the end of both of the adventures as well, the characters decide to destroy the device or plans for the device rather than have it fall into the wrong hands. So my theory is that Frantic is a remake of the Calculus Affair, with Tintin as Harrison Ford, Calculus as his wife, and Captain Haddock as the Emmanuel Senior thing. Well, maybe not so much.
I mean, you've hit a bit at the end there, but
I think that whether he realized it or not, Roman Polanski was thinking about the Calculus Affair when he made Frantic.
I think it's a solid theory, actually. I think that's too many coincidences in there. I mean, and there's no such thing as as a movie writer, if I hear a good idea, you put elements of it in your film. I mean, if you copy something outright, it's a bit dickish, but if you make it your own, there's no such thing as original idea. There's just no such thing unless you rip something off, which is a different matter. But yeah, although I can't imagine, as in Frantic, I can't imagine Tintin in a French nightclub cubicle taking coke. Which Harrison,
it's all there.
It's all there. But no, I think it's a pretty solid theory, that, and I think if you haven't seen Frantic, by the way, it's an amazing movie. 1987, I think. Harrison Ford and his wife go to Paris. She goes missing. Why? But it's a great European American action thriller. One of Polanski's best. I think it's your favorite of his, isn't it?
It is indeed. And if the Hergé Foundation are watching, maybe they want to watch it as well, and maybe get in touch with Roman Polanski.
Yeah, maybe. Imagine. I don't think anyone wants to get in touch with Roman Polanski these days. Moving swiftly on.
Let's talk balls.
What are the balls? Right. Out of a possible 7 crystal balls, the Calculus Affair will get from me 7 crystal balls. Because it is a perfect book. I can't really fault it, nor would I want to. I was surprised how good this was, actually, not because of Hergé, I think he's a genius, but I can't remember this one as well. Maybe it got overshadowed a little bit by the Moon ones, but yeah, it's a solid 7.
It is a solid 7. That was right? Easy.
Wasn't it? I knew this is one of your favorites as well, so when I was reading it, I was like, I hope I like it.
Yeah. So yes, the serialization of the Calculus Affair finished in Tintin magazine on the 22nd of February 1956, and it was published in French by Casterman the same year, and the first English version was released by Methuen in 1960. Hergé's periodic absences for his eczema and things did continue, but it didn't seem to hold up the publication of this particular book as it had in the previous books. Rather than the new studios, Hergé taking the weight of responsibility from Hergé's shoulders, though, I think Hergé now felt the burden of being the head of the studio. So that is something that will, I think, become an issue over the next few books. In addition to that, during the 1950s, many of Hergé's former colleagues who had been imprisoned for collaboration during the war, they started to be released. Without Hergé's boss on Tintin magazine knowing, Hergé was giving work to these former prisoners, these former collaborators at Studios Hergé. He even seems to have given work to past colleagues who'd been sentenced to death for their collaboration, basically people who were on the run from justice, using pseudonyms and things, so that Leblanc wouldn't know that they were working essentially on these cartoons. So after Hergé died, apparently Robert Poulet, who was a journalist and a Nazi collaborator during the war, said between 1950 and 1960, Hergé was the great supporter of the execrated and the banned, whom he knew to be completely honest. My friend Georges, obviously Hergé, I want to acknowledge here, did so many things for me and many others when times were most difficult for us. I am and will remain always morally in his debt, and I'm bound to him by an unshakable brotherhood of the heart. Now, Hergé's boss at Tintin magazine, on the other hand, said, eventually that fucking Hergé surrounded me with a knot of former collaborators. He was furious. So, yeah.
Oh dear. Do you know what I kind of like? You know, Hergé was a complicated guy. He was a human being. He had a lot of problems, a lot of complexities. I like the fact that he was a bit of a rogue. He could be a bit of a brat. I like the fact that he was stubborn. He was artistic. He was a stubborn artist. And, you know, I can definitely relate. I don't have his level of genius, but I've definitely been guilty myself of being quite stubborn and a bit childish sometimes. And it's not an admirable quality. But with Hergé, you know, the output was so good that he was, whatever he needed to do to justify keeping working, you kind of have to applaud it. You know, I mean, it was down to his poor wife and his friends and his colleagues to suffer the
to suck it up
fallout, really, wasn't it? Yeah, but for us, we get all his amazing works.
I think it's fascinating. I mean, the most fascinating thing about doing this has been seeing a life, basically, with all of its contradictions and all of its complexities laid out there, and seeing how the man changed over time, how he worked with different collaborators over time, and the ups and downs and the trials and the tribulations. And I just wonder if when we come to the end of these adventures, we will really ever know the man Hergé.
I get a feeling we won't, but I think he's a bit of a mystery. I think he was quite a private person. I think he put his genius into his work. And we should definitely mention, but I love the fact that apparently it was a last minute decision to put the smashed glass frame around it. It was just that with the title on, which is great. And that's a direct panel from the book. And it's not often you get that. It's always a version, whereas this is pretty much as it appears in the book. But I love this shattered glass.
And one similarity with next week's book is that this time we've got this sort of cutout with the glass. Next week we have a similar cutout, I think, this time with a spyglass. Yeah, the Red Sea Sharks.
Again, one I don't know very well. I've got a feeling Red Sea Sharks is one I have an ancient copy of, which we can go into next week. But it's a very old, tattered, smelly, nice, old, smelly book.
Look forward to smelling it then.
Smell you later. And again, thanks for all your comments and follows and subscribes and stuff. It's really nice to see the view counts going up. Obviously, a lot of Tintin fans out there. We love doing it, so we will continue. Same time, same place. Bye-bye.
See you.